All right, good morning. This is Jeff Scott. Today is Monday, the 6th of March, 2023, and we are going to begin today the JavaScript portion of our AWD1000 Web Development Technologies class. All right, and just a couple things before we go. I wanted to mention these URLs that I put in the email today. There's about 5 of them. The first one, and these are all just things I found online. The first one is 30 days of JavaScript. All right, and let's see. I don't know if I can get to that. See if it lets me open it. Open it in a new tab. How's that? There we go. All right, so there's the first one. And it's just a bunch of different stuff on JavaScript. I believe it's more extensive than what we go into, but there's a lot of really nice information in there if you're interested, if you've got time and you've got the interest. The next one is JavaScript30.com, and this is the Wes Bowes course. You can sign up for free, build 30 things in 30 days with 30 tutorials. Now, sometimes what happens is people tell me, well, I don't have time to do this. Then don't do it. It's totally fine. All right. But if you're looking for extra, extra information that maybe isn't even covered in class, extensive looks into some of the stuff we do go over, that's just a possibility. The next one is the JavaScript tutorial from W3 Schools. You can see it over here. It's quite extensive. All right, so there's a lot of stuff in here. You might want to take a look at that at some time during the rest of the semester. Whoops. Next, we have one. So next, we have the Mozilla JavaScript tutorial again, which is very extensive. There's a lot of stuff in here under this JavaScript guide. Just you have to take my word for it. Just a lot of stuff. All right. And that'll get you, again, additional information if you're so inclined. And then finally, it's something I'd forgotten about, but I found it this morning, and that's this Odin project. Let me open that up as well. All right, and it says here, view full curriculum, and notice they've got a bunch of paths that you can go down there. There's a full stack JavaScript. I would just go to the foundations one, to be honest with you, and go to the explore. And what you're going to notice when you start to look in there is an HTML foundations, a CSS foundations, and a JavaScript foundations. All right, a lot of really good stuff out there. Unfortunately, there's not enough time to go through everything that there actually is. All right, so let's jump into our book, and as we do, just a couple things as well, just so you have some kind of an idea of where we're going, the path we're going on, etc. in here. All right. So what do I mean by that? Well, as of right now, and I don't want to go too far into the future. All right. I don't want to go too far into the future, but as of right now, you can plan on today. I'm going to go through all of chapter 1. All right. That may take an hour. It may take more than that. I don't really know. And when we get done, we'll take a look at, there's an extensive example in the chapter, and we will look at that. All right. The rest of the period will be lab. Please remember 2 things. The first thing is that your bootstrap test is due on Wednesday by midnight. And the second thing is we're going to go through chapters 1, 2, and 3 this week, but the homework will not be due this week. The homework will be due the following week. So you can plan on today, chapter 1. All right, go through it extensively, the rest of the period lab. Tomorrow, chapter 2, go through it extensively, the rest of the period lab. Wednesday, chapter 3, go through it extensively, the rest of the period lab. Thursday, we will go over some of the assigned homework and or lab assignments for chapters 1, 2, and 3. All right, next will be our typical lab period. Next Monday, what I'm planning right now is I'll give you a pretest on chapters 1, 2, and 3. Again, I'll give you an hour plus or an hour and a half to go over it, and then I'll spend about an hour and a half going over it. And then a week from tomorrow, which is the 14th, if I did my math right, that'll be our test then on chapters 1, 2, and 3. All right. Then on Wednesday of next week, we'll go through chapters 4, or if there's time, 4 and 5. All right. And then you can probably plan on the next test. I don't know if it'll be it won't be next week, but it'll probably be the following week, and it'll be on like 4, 5, 6, and 7, I think. Let's just see how it goes as we get through here. All right, so I'm going to move up to chapter 1 here. Now, originally, I wasn't going to go over this because I thought to myself, well, there's so much duplication between this and the old book that we had. But the difference is there is stuff in this chapter that was not covered in chapter 1 of our old book. So the stuff with how a web application works, the first 5 or 10 pages, we won't spend much time on because we've already done that. We've already spent some time talking about that. All right. So this how a web application works, we're going to bang through that fairly quickly. How the ECMA spec works, well, that's very short, but we'll look at that quickly. Then we're going to start in earnest looking at the components of a JavaScript application. So we will look at an application, we'll look at the HTML, we'll look at the CSS, but even more so, we'll look at the JavaScript. All right. Then the next part, which is the HTML skills you'll need for this book, guess what? That's what the first part of the class was about. The next part, the CSS skills you will need for this book. Again, that's what the first part of this class was about. And when we'll spend a little bit more time on how to test a JavaScript application. This how to use Visual Code. Well, you know how to use Visual Code, but we'll look at a couple things we have not talked about before with Visual Code or Visual Studio Code, whatever you want to call it. Usually it's VS Code. So as it says in here, in fact, let's move back a page or two. And it says that section 1, which is the first 7 chapters, gives you a look at JavaScript essentials. Chapter 1, as it says, is a lot on concepts and terminology. All right. Chapter 2 presents a starting subset of the JavaScript language. 3 and 4 build on that. Chapter 5, which is a short chapter, shows you how to test and debug JavaScript applications. Chapter 6 is probably the most extensive chapter in here, or at least amongst the most extensive chapters in this book, and it's on scripting with the DOM. Chapter 7 is on image and timing, all right, timers. And then by that point, we'll be ready to hopefully start to transition over from total JavaScript newbie to an intermediate type of JavaScript programmer. And that's the idea when we get into the jQuery part in a few weeks, which will be in section 2. All right. Let's just jump into this. Now, we went through this already, and we talked about the difference between, talked about a web application. I mentioned to you that the way this has changed in the past few years, 5+ years, is previously this would have said computer, 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 where 2 of those computers have been replaced with tablets and smartphones. And I've also have mentioned to you in the past that as of about 1.5 to 2.5 years ago, let's just say 2 years ago, tablets and smartphones have usurped or replaced desktops and laptops. In other words, more people look at different computer applications and different things on a computer or on the internet. More people do those using tablets and smartphones than do using desktops and laptops. All right. Now, the other thing I want you to realize in here, the amount of work that we're going to do in this class, in the class you're in right now, all right, the amount of work that we do with a web server will be at best limited. When those of you where this is your first class. So if you took AWD 1100, the C# class last semester, of course you're in AWD 1000 now, then in summer you will be taking with Mr. Gudmested the AWD 1111 class, all right, which is database driven website development 1. And then you're going to work a lot on server side JavaScript. That's basically the hallmark of that class. The rest of you, where AWD 1000 is your first class, the one we're in now, those people in summer will, with me, will be taking the C# programming class. Okay, so as they mentioned there, the web app consists of clients, a web server, and a network. The clients use browser to get basically what they want. And the thing to realize too, and we've talked about this before, you'll probably see it either in this chapter or somewhere else, but you, whether you're using a computer or a tablet or a smartphone, when you request something from the internet, you are making what's referred to as a hypertext transfer protocol, or HTTP request. And that doesn't matter whether you type an address in at your address bar or you click a hyperlink to get someplace. In both cases, you're making an HTTP request. Now, if it's very simple and there's no work involved in databases and the like, then the web server will basically format and formulate some kind of an HTTP or hypertext transfer protocol response that'll be sent back to your computer or your tablet or your smartphone. And this is a very simple example, and we'll probably look at it again, but in the simplest case, there's only a single web server involved. Typically, that's when you are just requesting a web page and nothing else has to be done. On the other hand, when you request something, so if you go out to Amazon and you request, you say you want to order something or whatever, there's more than one web server involved. All right. A couple more definitions. We've seen these before. Again, a web server returns pages requested to the browser. A network connects clients to a web server. All right. And really, the network that we have, you could kind of look at it as being the internet. All right. You can have an intranet, which, as it says there, is a LAN or a local area network where typically you're connecting computers. They may be physically connected to one another, or at least, as it says here, they're in the same building. The internet is a series of WANs, or wide area networks. All right. And with those wide area networks, they're not physically connected to one another. I've given you the example that at Rankin Technical College, all right, if you go into, let's just say, the Wentzville campus, and where I had been teaching out of until this program went online, in the Taylor building, room 201, the machines that are in there are physically connected to one another. There is also a router in there that had a connection to the St. Louis campus. So they weren't physically connected. All right. There's no way that you're going to run cable 40 miles underground. All right. But there was a connection, all right, to the two computers in St. Louis. So as it says, the internet is often today referred to as the cloud, which is, as it says, implies there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes that most of us don't understand and don't have to understand. And again, if you're, like, for example, I've got an account with Charter. Charter is my ISP, or my internet service provider. As it says, they own a WAN that's connected to the internet. All right, so the first thing that I just mentioned, what we have been talking about, basically is how static web pages are processed. All right, as it says, a static web page is one that doesn't change each time it is requested. All right, so you can look at it that you're requesting something that's going to come back, and virtually all the time it's going to look the same. All right, so as I mentioned to you previously, if I go out to Rankin's website and it gives me back the index.html page for Rankin, and I go back tomorrow, the chances are pretty good it's going to look the same. On the other hand, if I go out to, even if I go out to Amazon, their main page will probably look the same today as it does tomorrow. But as soon as I come in and start to order something or whatever, there's a lot more to it then. All right. So I've already mentioned HTTP for you before. And this HTTP, this hypertext transfer protocol, the HTTP requests or the request object and the HTTP response or object are going to be kind of the hallmark of the AWD1111 database-driven website development class that'll be offered again in summer for those of you where you'll be doing your third class, and in fall, all right, when it'll be your third class. As it says here, when the browser receives the HTTP response, it renders or translates the HTML into a web page that can be displayed, all right, by the browser itself. All right, good morning, Grant. We're just getting started, and this is so far has been a lot of review. Okay, all right, and so as I mentioned, with a static web page, it's going to be simple. What you're going to notice in just a couple minutes is whether it's a static web page or a non-static web page. It still is the process of an HTTP request made to a server, and it's still the process of an HTTP response coming back from a server. The difference will be when we're talking about a non-static page is we'll have more than one server involved. All right, so again, we've talked about this before. As I mentioned, the first 10 or 12 pages in this chapter are pretty much the same as the first 10 or 12 pages we had from the previous chapter. All right, so again, that's the picture. So you can see there's more than one server involved. All right, and even with this, it could be even more complex than this, but the dynamicity that they're talking about comes from the fact that the user doesn't just want to get back a home page. So for instance, I had a student last week, a graduate, and she sent me an email and she said, hey, I want to get a copy of a transcript. I've got a job now, but I'm applying for a different job and I need an official copy of my Rankin transcripts. And I told her about the registrar, but I also looked online and there's a form that you can fill out. All right, if you want an official copy. And I sent her that link. But the point is, that is not directly when you type in rankin.edu or https://rankin.edu, boom, that's not what comes up right away. All right. So the index page is what you get if it just goes from here to here and back again. But there it had to go to another some application server, and it could have been a database server after that, or it might not have. I don't know. I don't really care. But the point is, what you see here is you get the arrows going in both directions here. And again, there's more than one server involved. All right. Okay. So not that this is new, all right, but as it says right here, in contrast to server-side processing done for dynamic web pages, JavaScript is a scripting language that provides for client-side processing. Now, I do want to mention that's 100% true. All right, just so you know, that sentence is 100% true. Yet, all right, JavaScript is now used a lot for server-side processing as well. This entire book and the rest of our class, we will talk about JavaScript solely as being used for client-side processing. Again, next semester, those of you who will be in the AWD1111 class, you will be using JavaScript for server-side processing. All right. And there's a lot of different ways that this can be used, such as they mention in here, they talk about a rollover, an image rollover. Maybe you've seen this before. So the idea is if we got this shirt right here, and I can't even tell the difference if one is black and one is blue or whatever. But if I click on this white, this should immediately change. It's an image swap. We've looked at image rollovers before. You may remember that from our old textbook where we had the picture of, it was like a woman on a horse, I believe. And there were about 4 or 5 thumbnail images. And then down below that was a bigger image. And when you highlighted any of the thumbnail images, the bigger image below changed as you change what was highlighted. All right. And that's what they're talking about in here. All right. So let's jump back and then we'll jump forward again. So it says there when a browser requests a web page, both the HTML and the related JavaScript are returned by the browser to the browser by the web server. Now that's done in many ways in kind of an automatic type of process. All right. And that's not really that well put to say that it's automatic because there's a lot more to it than that. All right. And they mention here that JavaScript can be used for other things as well. Yeah, we'll go in and we'll talk about data validation in a little bit. We'll also talk about some of the JavaScript libraries. In particular, chapters 8, 9, 10, and 11, we will go over jQuery. That's all of what section 2 in the textbook is about. All right. So this is not an extensive list. All right. Now, I want to mention something because, again, I'm not disagreeing with the author, but I want to add to what the author is saying. The author is saying here that JavaScript is a scripting language. That's true. It's run by the JavaScript engine of a web browser, and it controls the browser operation. That's true. All right. Even though, as it says here, JavaScript is a scripting language, it is a full-fledged programming language. All right. In addition, JavaScript is, what am I looking for here? It is what's referred to as an interpreted language as opposed to a compiled language. All right. And I want to give you 2 quick little, not stories, but whatever you want to call them, to make you start understanding the difference between something that's compiled and something that's interpreted. The first programming language that I took when I was your age, the age of most of you, which many years ago, yes, yeah, now 40 years ago, I guess. All right. The first language that I took was a language that's called COBOL, which is an acronym for Common Business Oriented Language. It's still used. It's not as popular anymore, but there's still between 3 and 6 trillion lines of it out there. All right. So why am I even telling you this? All right. The first time I ran one of my COBOL programs is compiled. And what compiled means is the program went, the software that ran the program looked through my entire program. Even if it found an error, it kept going. And even if it found another error, it kept going. And I'll always remember this because the first time I ran a program, it came back with 126 errors. And I'm like, woo. And that's one of the things I learned from there was when you start going over your errors, try to solve them from top to bottom, because a lot of times an error up above will cause an error down below. And sure enough, with COBOL, you had to write a lot of periods at the end of different things. Like we use semicolons. All right, you had to put periods. And I missed a period up near the top. Putting in that period, I went from 126 errors to 20. All right. So literally I lost over 100 of my errors. All right. But the point is this, the program that ran my program went through everything and it flagged. There were 50 or 60 lines in the program, and it went through all 50 or 60 lines looking for errors. That's a compiled programming language. All right. JavaScript is what's referred to as an interpreted programming language. So typically when it finds an error, the program just stops right there, and it makes you makes you fix that error. Then you can go on, and if it finds another error, it stops there. It's kind of like this. This is the way I used to explain it to people. Maybe it's a good example, maybe it's not. But let's imagine that I've got a friend, and the friend that I have is from another country. Okay. And so I'm going to just imagine I'm making all this up right off the top of my head. All right. So I've got a friend who comes over to visit, and this friend is from France. All right. In fact, my daughter actually had somebody she played college soccer with who was from France, but she was very well versed in English and in French. But I'm going to imagine I've got this friend, and they come over, and their understanding of English is not very good, and my understanding of French is not very good. And we want to have a conversation. All right. Well, it's pretty hard. So we bring in a third person who's a translator. That's a person either who's French and knows English, or that's a person who's English and knows French. It doesn't matter. All right. But imagine when you talk about compiler, let's say that I start talking like I am right now. All right. And I go through a really long thing where I talk for a couple minutes. And then when I get done, the person translates everything that I said into French so that the other person can understand it. That's a compiler. On the other hand, let's imagine that I'm saying something and I use some kind of a word, and that person does not really know, geez, what's the French equivalent of this word? So I have to stop for a minute. They're like, stop talking. And they've got an actual French or English to French dictionary. They look up the word, and then, okay, you can go on now. That's interpreting. So again, with a compiler, it keeps going and going and going, even when it finds errors, as opposed to with an interpreter, it stops once it finds an error and it makes you figure out what it is. All right, I want you to understand that, because sometimes people get a little bit frustrated when they start looking at the stuff that's in here, and they're like, geez, it's like I found this error and now it found another error. Well, what's going to happen and what you will find is when we start going through this and you start finding errors, you're going to say, hey, I disagree with you because it found this error, but it kept going on and it found other errors as well. And it might do that, but it's not going to allow you to continue once it finds an error, is basically what I'm saying. All right. Now, hopefully you remember this. And we've already talked about this, that if you go out to W3schools.com. We've talked about this before. I'm not going to spend any time on this, but just so you know, this thing right here, W3, is an acronym that stands for WWW, which stands for World Wide Web. So why am I even bringing that up? All right. I'm bringing that up because what W3C, which is the World Wide Web Consortium, all right, what they are is they're an advising body that comes up with recommendations, and it says, hey, browser manufacturers, you should be doing this, you should be doing this, you should be doing this. They can't force browser manufacturers to do different things. What they do is they make recommendations. And by and large, 100% of the time, these recommendations that are made by the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, are followed by different browsers. All right, that's fine and dandy, but why am I even telling you this? Because the W3C is the governing body for HTML, the hypertext markup language, and they're pretty much the governing body as well for CSS, cascading style sheets. However, they are not, repeat, they are not the governing body for JavaScript. JavaScript was originally called ECMAScript. Some places still refer to it as ECMAScript. So what is ECMA? ECMA is an acronym that stands for European Computer Manufacturing Association. They're the body that oversees JavaScript the way that the W3C oversees HTML, and the way The W3C oversees CSS. So they're basically the compliance people, for lack of better words. All right. Now, JavaScript was invented, as it says, in 1995. So in other words, it's coming up on its 30-year anniversary. All right. Originally, it was going to be called LiveScript. And then around that time, the Java programming language, not JavaScript, but the Java programming language was being released. And to kind of jump on the Java train, so to speak, they decided, they being the people in charge, that rather than calling it LiveScript, they would call it JavaScript. All right. And they're just two different programming languages. There's more different between JavaScript and Java than there is similar. All right. Okay. As it says, it was developed by Netscape in 1995. And then in 1996, Microsoft developed a thing called JScript. And you might say, I never heard of that. That's pretty much how popular it became. It's one time when Microsoft, nobody really jumped on their ideas. All right. It says, since there were differences between the two, what happened was ECMA developed a standard. Since then, there have been many standards. Go back and you look at HTML, you'll see that there was HTML1 and HTML2 and HTML3 and HTML4 and HTML5, and there have been different subversions of each one of those, but not that many versions. If you look at CSS, there was CSS1, CSS2, and we're still in CSS3. All right. But that said, there are many ECMA see in there. And you can see there was ES1, ES2, ES3, ES4, ES5. Now, two of the most important ones that are in here are ES6 and ES7. And those are the ones that, for lack of better words, we'll probably concentrate on more than the other ones. All right. And you don't have to worry about it. It's like, well, geez, do I have to know every one of these? If you understand ES6 and ES7, you understand ES1 through ES5. All right. But the reason I'm mentioning ES6 and ES7, it'll be some of the stuff that we'll talk about later on in the course. All right. Stuff you don't have to worry about right now. All right. And they go through some stuff in here, and I don't want to confuse you with terminology. That's the last thing that I want to do as we get started to something new. So you can read the stuff that's in here. We will talk about strict mode. We will talk about arrays. We will talk about objects. We will talk about JSON, etc. All right. But you don't have to worry about that, at least not at this moment. All right. Okay. Now, browser support for ECMA. Well, the bottom line is this. Okay. If you go out and you can look, they have a compatibility table in there, but what you're going to find is, as it says, the features of ECMAScript through ES 2020 are supported by basically every browser that you can think of that's out there. So we won't have to worry about this. I don't know if there's a similar caniuse.com. I don't know if you can use the caniuse.com and if you can run that on JavaScript things. I guess I've never tried to do that. All right. All right. Says if you want to support other browsers or older versions, says you can go out to this website to see how to do that. And there's a lot of stuff we could talk about this in here about polyfill files, etc. It's not worth our time to talk about that, at least not right now. All right. All right. So the components of a JavaScript application. I'm going to go over all of this in a minute, but let's look over here. Now, what they're assuming right here, when you look at this picture that's on the screen, is that you've written all of this HTML. All right. But you haven't even added your CSS yet. That's why it looks the way it does. Now, I firmly believe that if I gave everybody watch on tape. If I gave you 10 minutes, probably even 5 minutes, you could all build this. It's a form. You could all build this if you had to. You can see that there are 3 different text boxes. All right. One of type E, or 2 of them are of type email, and one of them of type text. There's 3 labels. There's 2 buttons. There's an H1 tag that says, please join our email list. And then there's 3 asterisks. All right. So what I'm saying is, what we want to concentrate on here is not so much how this is built, and also not so much how this thing is styled, but what we want to get to is the JavaScript that's in here. All right. And hey, this is a first blush, as they say with this. It may not totally make sense. And if it doesn't, please don't let that bother you. All right. What the author has done here, be it good, bad, or indifferent, all right, regardless, what the author has done here is shown you a complete application, a complete app. All right. And I was thinking about this the other day, and I think I found this. In fact, I don't know if I have it here. Let me see if I can put this in here. Because I'm always trying to think in here that when we go through different things, what's the best way to show you how to do something? So I'm going to show you something right now quickly. I don't want to spend too much time on this or waste my time or your time on it. But let's see, bring this up. Of course, it's not recognizing the drive I want you to see. There it is. We may very well end up building this together, all of us. All right. It's something I created. It's nothing fantastic at all. It's called the Lou. Okay. This is kind of my ode, so to speak, to St. Louis. So you come in here as picture of the arch. You know, there's a thing in here to subscribe to the newsletter. This is just some sports ipsum, but you can see in here, the reason I'm showing it to you, and you've seen this a little bit before, there's a working clock. That's all powered by JavaScript. You could probably build this page, and the only thing you may have a little trouble with would be this line that's in the blue. You could do the rest. Even if you think you couldn't, you could. Then we've got an about page, and this isn't done very well. I was playing around with floats and other stuff in here, but this is actually some stuff from about the history of St. Louis, and it's got the same stuff. So why am I even showing you this? Because it's the contact page. What I did, there's a form, so we're not going to talk about that, but we're going to talk about this. So you get 10 tries to try to select a random number between 1 and 100. So I'm going to put a 50 in there. And it comes back and it says, wrong, your guess was too low. So I'm going to do 75. And it says, still, your guess was too low. So I'm going to do 87. And it still says, your guess was too low. I'm going to try 95. And it still says your guess is too low. How about 99? And it says, I got it. And it took me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tries to do that. All right. Why am I wasting your time telling you this? Because this is all powered by JavaScript. All right. This is an actual running JavaScript program. So if I go and I view my page source, what you're going to see in here is there's the thing for the date and time, and there's what's called guess. So this is all code that runs to make that game work. Now, I'm not going to go over this at all right now, because all it would probably do would be to confuse you. But that's the kind of thing you're going to be able to build by the time we get done in here. In fact, I don't know, we're not going to finish this chapter before the break, but we will after the break. All right. And after we do, what I'm planning on doing is having us write our first JavaScript program, and it'll be really simple. All right. On purpose. All right. So it says when you develop a JavaScript app, you use HTML to define the content and structure, and CSS for the aesthetics, so for formatting. Then you use JavaScript for client-side processing. The main reason we're going to use JavaScript in this application is for what, as they refer to right there, as data validation. All right, we want to make sure that whatever is put into the program, excuse me, is what should be put into the program. So they talk HTML, excuse me, they talk HTML here. All right, but I'm hoping, at least, forget about the mustard line here, but I'm hoping that there's nothing that's in here that people don't understand. All right, again, you can take a look at it if you need to, but it's a form. It starts right here and it goes all the way down to right here. And that pretty much is the heart and soul of this program. Other than that, meta tags, etc., nothing new in here. So I don't want to go over that at all. All right. Same thing in here. They talk about CSS, and I don't want to go over the CSS at all. So they put CSS in to convert this right there into this. Now, some of the stuff you should be able to look at, the coloring of the H1 tag, the fact that they straightened out how everything looks, the fact that the asterisks are red, etc. That's all the CSS, the blue border around the whole program. But again, there shouldn't be anything that's in here that is so surprising to anyone. All right. So what I want to concentrate on is, like I said, the JavaScript. Now, please, I can't say this to you too many times. This is the first time we're looking at this. So if what we're doing makes very little sense, all right, I'm not going to say that's a bad thing or a good thing, but that's to be expected, all right, because this is something brand new. So as it says there, Figure 1.9 shows how the application looks in a browser if the JavaScript finds any invalid data when you click the button. What does that mean? Well, look in here. You can tell that the two emails that have been put in are not the same. One is grace@yahoo.com. The other one is just grace@yahoo. So our data validation came up with the fact that our email address and our confirmed email address are not the same. In addition, our data validation came up and said, hey, this first name is a required field and you left it off. That's what you can check with JavaScript. And there's plenty of other things, but that's what we're checking in here. Now, what you'll find out is, I believe, all they're checking in here is, are these two things the same? But when they set this up as well, let me go back and look, that the email, notice they said the email, the type is text for right here and for right there. I wouldn't have done it like that. I would have made the type email, all right, but they didn't. So in other words, if I put Grace here and I put Grace here and I put Grace here, the program will succeed, even though Grace is not an email address. All right, because we're not looking for that. We're looking, in fact, if we put grace@yahoo.com right here and we left this blank, then it would say here, email address is required. All right, so we're doing some simplistic data validation here. All right, now you're going to start to hear some words. Some of them will make sense. Some of them may not make sense right now. Okay, and you're going to look at some stuff that for right now may make very little sense, but it's okay. So when you look up on the page here, I'm up near the top and it says, when JavaScript changes the page, the HTML for a page, it's called DOM scripting. Chapter 6 in the book, I believe it's chapter 6, it's 6 or 7, is all on the DOM. So they're actually showing you something that they're not really going to explain for a couple hundred pages, but they're trying to show you the power of being able to use this. And one of the things that you can do with the DOM is you can automatically update things on a web page. You already saw that with this little example that I just gave you, because in many ways, right here, when I come down to here, notice how that's running. That's being updated every second. All right. And you're going to see more and more of that as we go on, because one thing I mentioned to you a long time ago, almost when we first began this class, was that HTML provides the content for the page. CSS allows us to aesthetically make a page more pleasing, and JavaScript provides interactivity on a page. And it's through the DOM that much of this interactivity is going to be done. All right. Notice what it says here. You are going to learn how this code works in the next 6 chapters. All right, so it says here, it says you may want to even just forget about it for now. Well, we're going to take a quick look at it, but not much. All right. And some of the stuff that's in here is going to, for lack of better words, is going to look a little bit funky. You know, it's like we never did anything like this before. And it's true, we didn't. All right. Now, when you look in here, all right, the first line should make sense. When we want to go in and add JavaScript to our program, all right, we have to use a script tag. There's nothing really new there. That's, but the rest of it, boy, that looks a little bit weird. So for instance, when you look here, it's like, well, what the heck is this? All right. What they're saying here is this right there is going to end up being a shortcut for this. Right. Well, right there. And if you say, I don't get it, you don't have to. You really and truly don't have to. But let's just look at a couple things that are in here. We're creating a variable that's called email1. We're creating another variable that's called email2. We're creating another variable that's called first name. And our variable that's called email1 is going to hold whatever we put in right here. Our variable that's called email2 is going to hold whatever we put in right there. And our variable that's called first name is going to hold whatever we put in right there. All right. Now, when you look at this, it looks a little weird. All right. And I understand that it looks a little weird, but let's try to make it so it's a little easier to understand. All right. Notice we've got here # email _1, # email _2, and # first _ name. Well, if we jump back for a second into our HTML, notice ID equals email _ oh, there it is. ID equals email _1, ID equals email _2, and ID equals first _ name. So all we're saying right here is these three things are going to hold the values of whatever we put into these three things. All right. And if that even makes a little bit of sense to you, that's where you should be right now. All right. Now, not to try to confuse you, but we're going to learn in here where it says const, C-O-N-S-T, that's short for constant. All right. Sometimes we'll use the word const in there. Sometimes we'll use the word let in there. All right. And don't worry about the difference. Don't worry about any of it. Not only that, if you look at older JavaScript programs, ones that were written years ago, all right, they didn't use const typically. They didn't use let, but they used the word var, V-A-R. Var is short for variable, which is what these three things are. All right, so email1 and email2 and first name, the things to the left of the equal sign, they're all variables. All right. The word const there means that those variables that are in there should not be allowed to change while the program is running. All right. If we wanted to be able to change them while the program was running, we would have used the word let in there, but we didn't. All right. Then the next thing that we're doing in here is we're doing what's called data validation. We're saying, hey, if we left the email empty, then we want to take this thing that had a red asterisk in it, and instead of having a red asterisk, we want to change it to email is required. If we get down to this else, either this is true or this is false. So kind of imagine if this confuses you, you're going down a road and the road ends. And literally, since the road ends, you've either got to go left or you've got to go right. So kind of this is going left and this is going right. So if there was nothing in there, we want to have that message come up. All right. If there was something in there, we don't want anything that's in there. So this, when we get done, will either be blank and you can see that it is, or it'll give us an error message. All right. Then we've got this thing in here that says, is valid equal false? Well, what the heck is that? That's another variable. And you'll notice there we created it with the word let, meaning that it can change because it can possibly bounce back and forth between being true and being false. All right. This is what's called a Boolean variable. And oftentimes Boolean variables start with the word is. Like, for example, is married, is union member. Now, it's not like, remember, the computer understands ones and zeros, yeses and nos, trues and false, whatever you want to look at it as, but it doesn't understand kinda. So in other words, is valid must be true or it must be false. It will be true in this case if we put something into that box that was right here. Otherwise, it will be false. Then we do the same thing and we check the second box. Even though it already might have been false, we'll set it to false again if we have to. So again, in here, we're not checking to see if it's empty. That's what this is checking. Is it empty? No, we're checking here to see, does this one equal this one? Are the two the same? You can see they're not. So it says emails must match. So there's that message. So it is replacing what had been there as a red asterisk with a red error message that says emails must match. And again, it'll set this thing that's typically referred to as a Boolean flag. It's setting it to false. All right. If the two were equal to one another, it's going to set nothing in there. Then finally, we go through and we do the same thing with the first name. If the first name has nothing in it, we're going to say first name is required, as you can see right there, and we're going to set that flag to false. Otherwise, there'll be no message that's right there. So either there's one message here, nothing here, or there's like about 6 combinations. There is or is not a message here. There is or is not a message there. There is or is not a message there. All right. And this is saying if there was not a message, all right. In fact, if there was some kind of a message, meaning this is a shortcut, believe it or not, all right, for this. It means the same thing as this does here. But when we do it, we put another equal sign in. And again, this is all, what? I don't even understand what you're talking about. You don't have to right now. All right. But this is saying, hey, if this flag that we've got, this is valid flag, if it was set to false, all right, we are preventing the default. So in other words, if there's an error here, or here, and you click this button, have nothing happen. I want to say that again. If you have an error here, and or you have an error here, and or you have an error here, when you click the join list button, don't do anything with it. Act as though we didn't even do anything. So what that is doing is it's preventing the default action of clicking a button. All right. We're going to take a break in just a moment here, but here we go. All right. So this is all explained in here, and the author even says, hey, don't let it throw you too much if it doesn't make a whole lot of sense right now. And Grant, I know like with you and James and Andrew, etc., and anybody else, Chad, who took this class, the C# class last semester, you've sort of got a leg up on the other people in the class just because you've at least, the syntax, the way it looked was totally different in C#, but you have an understanding of what things like variables are. All right. It is 9:01. Let's come back at 9:15 and we'll see if we can finish up this chapter and then do a couple simple examples in JavaScript. All right. So let's come back at 9:15, please. All right, it is 9:15, so I'm going to continue on. Again, the information that you see on here may or may not make a lot of sense, and if it doesn't, it's totally fine. This thing that says clear form right here, these three lines that you see right here, where it's got the value equals nothing, what those three lines right there do is it blanks out anything that might happen to be in this box, and in this box, and in this box. All right. And the next three lines that are in here, notice it says equals an asterisk. What those three lines do is it removes whatever was here and replaces it so there's a red asterisk here and one there. Then finally, the last thing will set the focus. And you know what focus is already. It'll make sure that this field right here, the email address field, is the one that's highlighted. It's the one where you have the mouse right now. Okay. The stuff that's in here, I don't even really want to get into it right now. Basically, what it's saying is, hey, when you click the button that says join list, we want you to run the routine that's called join list. When you click the button that says clear form, we want you to run the routine that's called clear form. And if that made absolutely no sense to you, it's totally, totally, totally fine. All right. All right. The next two sections in here, we're going to just skim and go through them quickly. And the reason is because it says, well, they recommend that you use Murach's HTML5 and CSS3 as a reference. Well, you've already gone through that book. So in here, they talk about your primary HTML5 semantic elements. Now, we haven't spent a lot of time on some of these. We didn't really do much work with articles and asides, but you won't need those for what we're doing in here. All right, the rest of the stuff that's in here, you should understand when a page is set up like this exactly what that means. That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody who's watching this lecture. And again, go ahead and give that a read if you want to, but it's all stuff we've talked about before. Now, I do want to mention this, div and span. All right, and the reason I want to mention that is when you look at, we go back and I'm going to jump all the way back to the HTML that's here. Yeah, I'm jumping way back. All right. And the reason I'm doing that is you'll notice we've got a and another div and etc. But inside of that div, we've got a span. All right. The reason that that's important is we want those asterisks to be on the same line as everything else. So there's our label, there's our text box, there's our span, which is our asterisk. Label text box, span item, label text box, span item. So remember, the thing about using a span is whereas a div that we've been using for quite a while, but whereas a div is what's considered a block level element. So it's designed to be on a line and have a blank line before it and a blank line after it. A span is not a block level element. It's an inline element. It's designed to be inside of something. And that wasn't a great explanation, but that's what they mentioned in here. Okay. So here's their definition. Div, again, block level element that provides a container for other elements, such as spans. All right. And you may or may not remember. In fact, if you go back and look at this, I don't remember because it's been a while since I've even looked at this, but the word R in here, you can see is in yellow. All right. And whatever the current one is in yellow as well. But the point is, this isn't changing. So if we go back in, I'm going to just look because for my own edification, I guess. If we go in and we look where it says we are, notice the word are is inside of a span. So when you want to do something special inside of something else, one way you can do that is via the use of a span. All right. Okay. And again, please read the stuff that's in here. By no means am I trying to say it's not important or whatever, but I also don't want to sit there and read to you. I'd rather go over it and give it to you with my verbiage. All right. How to use the basic attributes. Again, by now, you should understand what an ID is, what a class is, the name, the for, and the title. There's nothing in there that's new. You say, well, we didn't talk about a title. All the title does is it basically adds the equivalent of a tooltip. So where it says enter an email address here, if you put your mouse over it, it'll give you that message will come up. All right. But we've talked about these. You should by now be very, very, very familiar with classes and IDs. All right. And as far as the CSS skills, again, you should know how to code basic CSS skills. You should understand the difference between putting them inline versus internal with style tags versus external in their own .css file. This is, again, all stuff that we've talked about. There's nothing in here that's new. So let's jump into this, which gives us about 10 pages to go in the chapter. I think it ends around page 45. I don't really care, but it's somewhere around there. It says now you'll learn how to test a JavaScript application. It says to do that, you run the HTML for the web page that uses JavaScript. Let's do this. All right. And that is, I'm going to jump out and I'm going to grab our book, which I think is this one. I'm not sure, but I think it is. Book Apps, Chapter 1, email list. Okay. So I'm going to grab that. That's the same one we've been looking at. And I'm going to just make a copy of it and copy it over to the desktop. All right. So I should have something on here. There it is. Email list right there. And I'm going to right mouse click and I'm going to open it up with code. All right. They're going to show you a few things in here. There's absolutely nothing wrong with what they show you, but I'm not going to use them very often. If you say I don't understand, just give me a second here. All right, here's the index file with all the stuff in it. We kind of looked at that. Here was the CSS file. Kind of looked at that. Again, I think what they should be doing here, and I'm just going to show you this because it's time you learn best practices. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to create a new folder that I'm going to call CSS. All right. Then I'm going to grab this email.css file and I'm going to drag it and put it right in here. It says, are you sure you want to do this? Yes, I do. All right. Then I'm going to go and I'm going to grab and or go in here rather and create another new folder that I'm going to call JS. And I'm going to go and drag this one, our email list, into the JS folder. All right. Now, if I run the program now, it'll break. So let's fix it so it doesn't. So in here for my style sheet, this now must be CSS/email list. All right. And down at the bottom here where it says script, it now must be JS/email list. Now, at least now, the program should work. So if I do a file save all and then go and run it, by taking this and bringing it up in live server, it should run. And there it is. I'll make it bigger so you can see everything. All right. So again, if I leave all these blank, this should come in and say that this is required. This should say probably that they don't match, but I don't know if it'll say anything. And this will say that it's required, but these asterisks will change. Oh, okay. I guess they have nothing in there checking it to make sure. All right. So let's come in here and we'll put in this. I'll put in jpscott@rankin.edu. And I'm going to leave this confirm email address. I'm going to leave that blank. And it still says it. So right now it looks like it's not checking anything. All right. We could always come back and verify that by coming into our JS file here. And it looks like the stuff is here. So I'm not sure why it's not finding it, but let's take a quick look. So it's email list.js, which should be in there. Script is right here, email list.js. Ah. Well, it should be finding those, and I think this is set up correctly. Yeah, there it is. There's my JS file. There's my CSS file. All right. But in here, what I am going to do is, because I don't like where they put this, I'm going to grab this line, this script line, and I'm going to put it up on top. But when I do that, to make sure it works, I'm going to put the word defer in there. We're going to go over all this stuff. All right. So file, save all. Let's try running it again. No, I'm not sure why it's not picking up any of our errors, but still, it's okay. All right. I'm more concerned with figuring out everything else that's in this chapter. So, and we're going to look at a different example where you'll be able to see the errors in just a minute. So it says, when you want to run a JavaScript program, there's different ways of doing it. All right. And they mention them all right here. Some of these you're never going to use. I'm just telling you, you're never going to use them. All right. But another way we could have run this same program is I could have double clicked on here and then double clicked on index, and it brings it up as well. Same exact thing. All right. And there's other ways that you can do it as well. But for us, we're typically going to run our program either because we're going to have it open already inside of Visual Studio Code, and we're going to grab our HTML file, right mouse click on it, and choose Open in Live Server. Or if we do it from here, we're just going to double click on the HTML file. All right. And if you know that, that's really all you need to know about this. All right. Now, when they talk about the components of the URL, we've talked about that already. We went through this exact same thing that you see in here earlier on in the semester. All right. Now, they give you some stuff, and these are all generalizations. Just realize that the way that we're going to set our programs up is our HTML will not go into any folder. They'll be right underneath our main folder, so to speak. They won't be in their own folder. The JavaScript will be in a folder called JS. All right. And our CSS will be in a folder called CSS. All right. Now, one thing that's going to happen when we start working on this stuff and you go to run a program, you're going to see this. I'm going to show it to you right now. All right. And that is, we're going to eventually come in here and look at this, and we're going to click down here where it says inspect. We didn't do that much of that this past semester, a little bit, but not much. And what that's going to do is this allows us to look at our HTML. This allows us to go in and look at our CSS. But one thing we've never looked at in here before is this thing called console. And that's going to allow us from right here, I can run JavaScript. All right, as an example, I can come in here and say const first name equals Jeff. All right, don't worry about that undefined. Const last name equals Scott. All right, const full name equal, and there's different ways of doing this, but I'm going to do it the easy way. So first name plus a blank space plus last name. All right, now I'm going to say document dot write. I think you'll take it like this, full name. All right, and there, put it on here. So there it is. Now, if I want it on here, I should be able to just say full name, hit enter, and there it is. All I'm trying to show you here is this is something that's called the console. You can go and type in any type of JavaScript statement you want. I could type in, for example, 45 times 8. And notice it comes back with 360. So you can actually run JavaScript code from inside of the console. And you might say, do I need to care? Well, it's a little, sometimes it's more convenient to put some code in here as opposed to like saying here, alert, full name. and hit enter. All right, now it says, whoops, I had to spell it right. Try that again. Alert, full name. And there's my alert. But with that, I've got to come back in here and I got to close this, etc. So if you want to do something down and dirty in here, we'll be using the console quite a bit. All right. What really the people who work with this on a regular day-to-day basis recommend is that you do as little bit as possible using alerts. And when you do need to do something kind of external to your program, you use the console. All right. So that's what they talk about in here. And they get in and they mention the console panel right here and how there's different ways that you can open it. I showed you the inspect. You can usually hit the F12 key as well, etc. This will be nice because when you have errors, so you're sitting there and you're working on a program, you can't figure out for the life of you why it's not working. Normally what you can do is you can have your program up, all right, and you can go to the console, you an error message. All right. That's usually the way that it's used. It's a debugging tool more than anything else. All right. And finally, what's shown in here is they have a little bit of stuff in here on Visual Studio Code. Now they have this thing in here and they talk about opening folders, closing folders. You know how to do this stuff because we've been doing it all semester. What they do mention in here is working with files, and they talk about preview mode. Well, you've used preview mode, how to save or close a file, adding, all this stuff. All right. Editing JavaScript files. All right. There's different ways that you could do this. All right. But they will show you, at least at times, what you're going to find is when you have errors, it'll show on the screen. What do I mean by that? All right. I'm going to come in here and do this. So I'm going to come into our file, and where we have this email thing, where is it? Under JavaScript, we had this. Okay. Now notice this else. I'm spelling it wrong on purpose. So you can see it's coming up with an error. If I put my mouse over it, it says, hey, unknown word, keyword, or identifier, did you mean else? And if I try to run this right now with this error in it, so I go back to my index.html file and I try to run this, all right, you say, well, it worked. No, it didn't work. But if I do come in here now and right mouse click and go to inspect and then go to console, now it's showing me that there is an error, and it's showing me approximately where the error is in my code. I can even click on here. Usually you can. Well, maybe it won't let me now, but usually you can, and it'll show you. But I can go back now to my email list.js, and I can go to line 23. All right, so I'm going to do that right now. In fact, I'm going to go here, and over here in my email list, I'm going to go to line 23. It says, hey, there's a problem right there. So it showed me that there was a problem, and it showed me where the problem was. So again, using the console will be a really nice tool for you as far as coming in and being able to debug your programs when you've got problems with it. All right. There will be a certain amount of IntelliSense that's put in here. All right. Very simplistic stuff. All right. And as far as identifying the errors, I'll let you read this yourselves. As it says, it'll underline an error with a green wavy line. And when you've got something it doesn't understand, you might get a warning with a green wavy line. All right. The last thing they talk about in here is to install the open in browser extension. All right. I'm going to let you read that. I don't ever use this. I don't understand the advantage of using this versus the live server that we have. So you can open that. You can go through that and you can read it, but I'm not going to go through it at all. Why? Because I just think it's more stuff where I can make you confused, and I don't want to do that. All right. So let's take a little bit of time right now and let's just build something ourselves. This is going to be, again, really, really, one more time, really simplistic. All right. So let me go and close this. So I'm going to tell it to close this folder. I don't have to save anything, and now that's closed. Now I'm going to come in here, and this will be our first one. I can have you do real simple things, but let's at least do something that has a little bit of meaning to it. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this, just for lack of better words, we can call it whatever we want, but I'm going to call it first, F-I-R-S-T, first JS. Okay, that's it. I'm going to just call it first JS. Okay, all right. And then I'm going to open this up in Visual Studio Code. And I'm going to try to make this as simple as possible. And I really mean that. All right. So what you're going to notice is the first thing I'm going to do in here is I'm going to create an index.html file. Just like that, like we've been doing. I'm going to put in our exclamation point and hit tab. All right. I'll change this to first JS program. All right. And all I'm going to add in here is a script tag. And I'm going to say source equals JS slash, and I'm going to call it script.js. We haven't created it yet, so it doesn't know what we mean. All right. So don't worry about that. Okay. So we're going to bring that tag in here. I'm not going to have anything in the body here. I'm not going to use any CSS. If I ran this right now, it would be totally empty. But what I want to do is I want to come in here and create a new folder called JS. And in this new folder, I want to create a new file that's called script.js. Right? Script.js. Now, I can tell whether or not this works. If you remember, what we used to do is we would do stuff like this. We would come in and add a new folder. We would add a new folder called CSS. And then in that new folder, we would come in and do something, we have like a styles.css. And then we would just say something like body background color blue, something like that. All right, something real simple like that. Then we'd save it. We'd go back to our HTML. We would come in and bring in our link tag. And we'd say css/styles.css. We would save it. And we would run this with an open and live server, and the background should be blue. Boom, everything works. What does that mean? That means we wired it up so that it all works. All right, do I care? Not a bit. I'm going to get rid of the styles.css file because we don't need it for what we're doing. All right, and I'm even going to get rid of the CSS folder because we don't need it for what we're doing now. All right. So now we've got a JavaScript folder with a script.js file in it. And that file right now is empty. And we've got our index.html file. So I'm going to go to my script.js file, and I'm just going to put an alert in here that says, hello from JavaScript. That's it. Just like that. All right. Why did I do that? You'll see why in just a minute. So I'm going to save this. All right. There it is. And I'm going to go back to my HTML file, and I'm going to run this or open it in live server. So you'll see I get here the same alert I just put in there, hello from JavaScript. And it's telling me with a 127.0.0.1:5500, that means I'm using my machine. 127.0.0.1 is your local machine. 5500 is the port that this is using to run the program on. I just wanted to show you that they are wired up. They can communicate with one another. If I refresh, there it is. There it is. Now, to be honest with you, that's kind of a waste. I mean, do we really need that, etc.? And the answer is no. So we're going to come back in here and we're going to get rid of that statement and put in something that matters a little bit. All right. Now, while we're doing this, If this doesn't make sense to you, please don't let it bother you. All right. I'm going to hard code some stuff in. If you say, what does that mean? Watch what I do here. I'm going to say const, and I'm going to say miles. I'll do it like this. Miles driven equals 567. And I'm going to say const gallons used equals 17.8. And then const MPG equals miles driven, notice the IntelliSense is kicking in, divided by gallons used. All right. And then finally, I'm going to say, I'm going to put in one of those alerts. So I'm going to say here, alert, and I'm going to say miles driven plus miles driven. In fact, we'll put each one of them in their own alert. It's going to look a little weird, but it's fine. And then we'll say gallons used. And here we have to put gallons used. And here we'll put miles per gallon. And this will be MPG. Oops. Try it again with MPG. All right. So this is really our first JavaScript program that we have in here right now. Okay, and there's good things and bad things about it. We're going to look at them in just a minute. But let me do a file save all here. And this, I can't run it from here. You can't open up live server. You can only open up live server from an HTML file. All right. You'll also notice that even though I put in semicolons, they're all removed. And I'm going to show you why that is in just a minute. So let's go back to our HTML. And I'm going to right mouse click and say open in live server. And what you see hopefully is miles driven 567, gallons used 17.8, miles per gallon 31.853924, etc. Big number. All right. So I was getting basically 31.85 miles to the gallon. All right. It worked. That's good news. And let's talk then about some things that are good in this program and some things that are not so good in this program. All right. Well, the body was pretty simple. All right. If we didn't have this line in here, didn't have that line, the program wouldn't do anything because we're using an external JavaScript file. We're using an external JavaScript file. Just so you see this, all right, I'm going to take this and I'm going to comment out everything that's in here. So right now, there's nothing in here when we get done. There's nothing technically in here. All right, so I'm going to do a file, save all, and I'm going to run the program again. I don't think anything's going to happen. There is. So why did I even show you that? There is a reason, and that is this. If I take all of this information that I just put in here, and I'm going to copy it to the clipboard, all right, I can put it inside of my body if I want to do this. But in here I say script, and then I paste it in. All right. Now this is not recommended. This is very similar to when we went in and put CSS directly into our HTML. All right. But they should work the same way now when we get done. We'll find out right now. So file, save all. Remember, this is still commented out, so it's not running here. And if I run it, there's my first alert, my second alert, and my third alert. So it still works. Again, that is a way of doing it, but it is not the recommended way of doing it. All right. Another way I can do this is I can take this. This is running it in the body. I can actually go and run this and put it right up in the head section like that. Same kind of way. All right. So file, save all, run the program again. There's my first alert. my second alert, and my third alert. All right, so I've shown you four ways of writing and running this program, those being putting this directly into your body or putting it directly into the head. And then I showed you the quote best way of doing it, which was, whoops, right here, like that. All right, so that's the way I will expect you whenever possible. Now, are there ever exceptions to that rule? There's almost always an exception to anything. All right, but this is the way I will expect you to do it. So let's take a look at this program and break it down. All right. So when we take a look at what's in here right now, okay, we've got this thing. It's a variable, even though it's a constant variable, and it's how many miles we drove. This is how many gallons of gas we used. We divide the first one by the second one, and it gives us our miles per gallon. Then we print all of them out. There's nothing surprising there. The first thing I don't like, though, is I don't like the fact, if you remember, when it ran the miles per gallon, it had in there like 31.8537964321, etc. I want it to be, let's say, 2 decimal places. Let's say I want all of these to be 2 decimal places when they print out. So I'm going to stay here dot to fixed 2, which means I want them to 2 decimal places. I'm going to grab that here, and I'm going to put it here, and I'm going to put it here. All right, so let's do a file save all. Go back to our index page and run this. So now it says miles driven 567.00, which it didn't before. Gallons used 17.00, which it didn't before. And now it's got the miles per gallon 31.85, so it's been rounded. So you can use the to fixed, and that's basically a Java routine that you can use to make your life a little bit easier. Do you have to use it? No. All right, but I think it makes it much more readable than what we saw before. All right. Then the next thing is we're going to leave these here, but I'm going to grab these 3 lines and I'm going to copy them to the clipboard and I'm going to paste them again down here. You might say, well, why are you doing that? I'm going to change these from alerts to a, come on, document dot write statement. Okay. So I'm going to keep those alerts that are in there. Come on, Jeff. All right. And let's see what's changed, if anything. So file save all. All right. And let's run this. Well, that looks the same. That looks the same. That looks the same. But now I actually wrote on the screen all of this stuff and I didn't put any line breaks after it. I believe that when I put the line breaks in here, it wants a BR tag, for line breaks. So let's try to put in a BR here and a BR here and see if that fixes it. I don't think it's going to be a \n for new line. I think it's going to be a BR, but we'll find out right now. And there it is. Now, this is not meant to have you go, oh, wow. I'm just trying to show you a few fundamental things that we're going to end up working with as we go on and on further in here. All right, that's the sole idea behind this. All right, so let me remove these. And I don't know if you, hopefully when I say this, it'll just make some sense to you. But if I run this program 5,000 times, it's going to always give me the same result because I've hard coded what my miles driven was, and I've hard coded what my gallons used was. All right. Well, what if I don't want to do that? I don't have to. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to change this. Instead of 567, I'm going to say parse float. Don't worry, we're going to go over what it means in just a second. Prompt, enter gallons used. And I'm going to give it a default value, and I'll give it our same default we had, 567. All right. And then I'm going to come in here and say parse float, prompt, enter, enter. Well, the first one should have said miles driven. I might have put gallons used in there, so we're going to fix that right now. And this is going to say, I think it was 18 point, it was 17, something like that, 17.8. All right. So this first one should not say gallons used. It should say miles driven. My apologies. All right. And we're not going to change anything else. I'm going to put it just like that. All right. And then I'm going to come back after we run this, and I'm going to purposely make a mistake. And there's a reason I'm going to make a mistake, because it's one I make. I probably made it hundreds of times and still make it to this day. All right. I want to show that to you in just a moment. So I'm going to do a file save all. I'm going to come back to here and I'm going to run the program. And now notice it's got a message here that says enter miles driven, and there's a 567 already in there. So I can hit enter, and it says enter gallons used, and there's a 17.8 already in there. And now it's got my miles driven, my gallons used, and my miles per gallon. Well, that's good. All right. So it's working the same way. What's nice about it, though, is now when I come in here to run this, close a couple of these. Now when I come in here to run this, I don't have to put in those numbers. So I'm going to open it with live, put in here 239 and 12. And now I drove 239 miles, 12 miles to the gallons, or 12 gallons used. My miles per gallon was 19.92. So what's nice about what I just did is now by bringing this in like this, I'm able to ask the user to put in a number. So what does all this mean? This right here, everything you see inside of here, that's that thing that you saw up above that said enter miles driven, and then underneath it, it had 567. All right. JavaScript is expecting, the way I wrote this program, that there's going to be a number in there. But what you end up putting in here is not a number, it's a string of characters. So this is attempting to convert that to a number. All right. There's a parse int too that we'll talk about, not right now, but we will. So that's all fine and dandy. What if I do this? What if I run the program and I come in there and I just remove it and I don't put any number in there? And I do it again and I don't put any number in there. Then it comes back and it says miles driven NaN, which means I put in something there that was not a number. And I did it again for gallons used. Well, if I take not a number and I divide it by not a number, here should be a surprise. I get not a number. Right? So one bad thing about this program right now is that if I don't put something in there that's numeric, the program basically, it's not blowing up, but it's sure not giving me a right answer. All right. Now, before I fix that, which I'm going to do in a minute, let me just mention to you in here, notice I've got a paren there and a paren there, and I've got two parens here. I can't tell you how many times I left one of those parens off like that. So I've got two left parens, but only one right paren. I'm going to do a file save all, or a file save, I should say. Save all. And notice it's already got this here. It's coming back with a comma expected. It doesn't know what I'm trying to do. But, oh, I didn't notice that. I'm going to run it anyway. And I open it in live server and I get nothing. Just take my word for it. This is going to happen to you. You will either right mouse click and choose inspect, or at the top of your keyboard, hit your F12 key All right. Sometimes F12 doesn't appear to work. At least it's on my machine. But I'm going to inspect, and it's like, well, there's nothing here. But now notice if I go to console, it's starting to show me where my problem was. And in particular, it's saying here, uncaught syntax, missing parenthesis. All right. So it's letting me know that there's a missing parenthesis in there. Now it's got some other stuff in here about MIME types. Let's see if we can get those errors to go away. All right. In here, where I've got source equals this, I can put in there if I want to. What is it? I forgot what it is. We'll find it. The MIME type, yeah, I know that. This isn't in there and that isn't in there. I think it's type equals, but we'll find out right now. So we can put in here type equals text/JS. And we can do the same thing for our CSS by putting in type equals text/CSS here. What we're doing is we're putting in what's called a MIME type. All right, so if I save everything, it's still not going to work because of the error I had before. But when I open it with live server, and now when I come in and inspect, and I go to console, you'll notice the errors are not the same. It says refuse to apply this MIME type, and the reason is, now it's a little harder to understand. All right, it's because text HTML is not supported. Well, did I write the wrong thing? I probably did. Nope. Text.js and text CSS. So you used to have to write it. Now with a script tag, it defaults to JS or JavaScript, and the MIME type, when you put in this for a style sheet, defaults to CSS. So the recommendation is that you don't put it in anymore because there's no need to do it. Now that said, what that means is that when I do come back and run this, and I get errors, and I inspect, and I go to console, it's got, this is the only real error that's in here, missing that parenthesis. So if I come back into here and I put that parenthesis back in, and I save, all right, and I run the program, you'll notice it works. All right, so I mean, it's not like I can sit there and go to console and go to console here. It's still going to show that stuff for those MIME types. Is there a way to turn that off? There probably is. Here, no warnings. There. So if you click on that, now it says 3 errors. Technically, they're not errors. All right. You can also just remove, we used to be able to remove them like that as well. Now I want to show you a couple more things, and it's going to be it for today. All right. So how do I fix this? How do I fix this? All right. And I'm going to, before I go in and do this, okay, I'm going to put some code up here. And I'm going to give you a partial fix, but not the right one. And I'm going to say if is NaN miles driven. All right. So what I'm saying is if I put something in there that was non-numeric, I'm going to ask you to do it again. All right. And I'm going to do the same thing for gallons used. Okay. So this is an if statement. Don't worry if it doesn't make sense. I just am trying to show you a couple things. That's all I'm trying to do right now. All right. Here, and I'm going to open it with live server. Now I'm going to put in something that's non-numeric. And it comes back and it asks me to do it again. So let's say that now I got it. Boom. All right. Now, what didn't it like here? I don't know. See if there was an error in my code or not. Assignment to, oh, yeah, it's a constant variable. That's my error. So this shouldn't be constant anymore. We're allowing its value to change. So we're going to put in here let and make that a let. We are allowing its value to change, so it can't be a constant. That was my stupid fault. So let's run it again. Should be okay now. So I'm going to leave this blank, and it says, it asked me to do it again. So I put in something. Now I put in 567. Now it asked me to do gallons used, and I put in something non-numeric. And it asked me again, and I'll say 12. Now it works. The problem with using an if like we're using it right now is, okay, I'll run the program again, and I put in non-numeric. And now I put in non-numeric again. Now I put in non-numeric, and I put in non-numeric again. I still get NaN, NaN, and NaN. So what we're going to be going over within the next few periods is how to fix that. All right, Grant, I know you know this already because we've gone over this kind of stuff. But here, I'll change this from the word if to the word while. And I'll do the same thing here. All right, that is what's called a loop. And what that is going to do is it is going to force me to put in a value that passes my test in here. And if I don't, it'll keep asking me to do it again and again and again. So now when I do a file, save all right, and I run the program and I put in garbage, notice it's asking me, it's still asking me miles driven, miles driven, miles driven. All right, once I put in something, now it'll keep asking me for gallons used until I put in something that's valid. So we'll have a whole chapter that we'll go through if statements, and we'll have a whole chapter that will go through while loops. All right, so we're going to be hitting on all that stuff. I'm just showing you a few things. There's only one more thing I want to show you, and then we'll put the period to rest. All right, well, and actually a couple more things. The first one is, okay, this is fine. It's better than it was. Okay, but I want to, what happens now when I run this program and I say I drove negative 456 miles and I used a negative 34 gallons of gas? It takes that. All right, it actually gives me a positive number. All right, but it took my negative values, and it shouldn't do that. All right, well, how do I fix that? I can come in here and say, while it's not a number like this, or miles driven is less than or equal to 0. So now I'm putting another condition in there. I'm saying if this is the case, if either we put in something non-numeric or empty, or we put in something that's 0 or less, don't accept it. And I'll take that one and I'll put it here, and I'll also put it there. All right. And let's take a look at those now. So file, save all. So if I put in garbage, still doesn't take it. If I put in a negative number, doesn't take it. So it has to be, if I put in 0, doesn't take it. So I have to put in a positive number, and the same thing here. So if there's nothing in there, it won't take it. If it's non-numeric, it won't take it. If it's a negative number, it won't take it. Well, it did. Well, we'll have to look at that. Maybe I screwed that one up. So let's look. Oh, it's not miles driven, it's gallons used. Plus I left a parenthesis off of there. Oh, okay, the system removed that. So that should be gallons used. So run it one more time. So again, I'll put in a valid value, but here, if it's not, it doesn't take it. If it's 0, it doesn't take it. If it's a negative number, it doesn't take it. All right, so all of that is now working. Now, just a couple more things to show you here. First off, if you're not aware of this, all right, we've talked about this a little bit, but not really in much depth or breadth of coverage. And that is, if I go over on the side here and I go over to extensions right there are literally, if you told me there's 1,000 things in here I can add to my program, I would believe you. All right. And probably my guess is if I come in here and type in JavaScript, it'll probably find something. Most of the stuff that's in here, like Babel, etc., you wouldn't need it. It's more advanced stuff, but there's a bunch of stuff that's in here. Why am I even telling you this? Because there's a couple of these extensions you may or may not. It's up to you. I can't tell if you do or not. I don't really care if you do or not, but if you see them, there's one that's called Prettier. All right. And you can see mine's already installed. It'll automatically try to format your code for you. That's why when I did mine in here, all right, it removed the parentheses that I had here. I had a paren here and I had a paren here. But notice, so you can see what I have there. But notice once I do a file save, it removes those. That's something that Prettier is trying to do with its formatting. If you don't like that, you don't have to install that. But if you want it to do a little formatting for you, you can do that. All right. There's also something, and I gotta remember how to do this right now. If you go to File, let's see, where is it? I'll have to find it, but we will. In fact, I think we can go into one of these. I'm going to click on this gear that's on the very bottom of my screen here. I'm going to click on the gear and I'm going to go over to settings. All right. And there's a couple things in here that you may at least want to be aware of. For instance, notice my font size is 18. If I see it, I could change, for example, like 26 or 28 or whatever, and I can just tell it. All right, but there's a lot of things that are in here, is what I'm telling you. Mine is set up so that every time I hit tab, it only goes over 2 spaces. If I wanted it to be 4, I could just handle it there. All right. Here's my default font, I should say. All right. So there's a bunch of stuff that you can do here. Notice there's an autosave. I can do it. I can put an on focus change, which means as soon as I leave what I'm working on, boom, it'll automatically save for me. All right. So there's different things that you can set up. And there was one I was trying to remember what this one was. I typed in auto here and notice trim auto white space. So if there's extra white space, it'll automatically do that. Here's an auto save. I guess that's the same one we just looked at, but there's another one in here. I don't remember right now where it is, but there's one in here that'll automatically do formatting for you. Prettier will do some of it. Let's see. There you go. I think that's the one. Format on save. All right, that's kind of what I showed you before, where it removed the parentheses, etc. All right, so if you've got Prettier set up, what that'll do is every time you run save, it should format it. And if you say, I don't get what you're saying, let me try to show you here. So I'm going to come into here. Notice my font size is now bigger, probably too big. So let me go back to settings. And I'm going to set it back to 18 again. All right. That's a little bit better, I think. But if I come in here and do this, so I'm going to do a plus, and I'm going to hit enter here, and I'm going to hit that a bunch of times, and I'm going to get rid of this and this, etc. You can see it's kind of a little funky where I've thrown stuff all over the place. Now when I do a file save, it puts them all back again. And a lot of people like that. All right, some people don't because it's restrictive in that it's going to format it the way the software feels like it should be formatted. But if you do want to go in into your settings, I'd install Prettier first and then go in and type in the word on save. So notice if I uncheck it, then I come over here and do the same things I just did. Do something like this. Now when I do a file save, it doesn't format them. If that's the way you want it, of course you could leave it like that. But as soon as I check this again and I come back and I do a file save, now it all jumps back. I like that feature. All right. There's also another two features I want to talk to you about. And again, you may care, you may not care. All right. The first one is semicolons. All right. So notice it says it's prettier. Do you want to add a semicolon at the end of every line? JavaScript is an excellent first language to teach you. It also, pardon my French, it also sucks as a first language to teach you. And it's for the same reason. And that is that if you don't do things in JavaScript, it defaults and assumes that you did. So for instance, if you don't put a semicolon at the end of every executable line, an implied semicolon gets put in for you. All right. So you'll notice that right now, whether to add a semicolon at the end of every line, if I put this in here and I check it and I come back to here and I put a semicolon here and here and here and here and I save, they're all there. But if I go back again and remove that and again go back into here and save again, now they're all gone. Now, I said that that JavaScript is good and bad for the same reason. And that reason is that it can give you bad habits. Some people like to have this thing checked, all right, meaning they want a semicolon at the end of every line. And for years when I taught this, that was recommended that you always put semicolons at the end of every line. Now it's more turned in the other direction. And more people say leave it off. And it just depends on your feelings. All right. So what I said before, that JavaScript in a way is a poor first language to teach you because, like I said, it can lead to bad habits. Where, for example, if you were to write a C# program and you left the semicolon off at the end of a line, you'd get an error message. All right. So it's all a matter of personal preference with this stuff in here. So there's semicolons. There's, like I told you before, I showed you that already. There was that thing in there with tabs. All right. And you can set your tab space. If I don't like it at 2, I can set it to 4. You know, there's so many different things that you can play with in here if you want to. You can change your common font rather, if you don't like the font that you're using. I've already shown you, you can change the font size. Though there's, like I said, there literally are probably, if you told me there's 100 things you could change, I'd believe you. All right. And now I believe most of that falls under prettier. So if you do want to do that, all right, and yours will look like this, but you'll have an install here. It's a one-time shot. All right. And it'll say install. And since mine's installed already, all right, That's why mine looks like this. The other one that I have is, I'm trying to remember what it's called. Maybe it's a colorizer. Oh, what is it? Oh, it's, you may or may not have noticed where my parentheses, they get to be in different colors. So I can tell that this one, they're both yellow, that they go together. These are both reddish, so they go together. And there is something in here that's called, I thought it was bracket colorizer, but it doesn't seem to be it. All right, it's rainbow brackets, but that isn't it. I can tell, but there's another way that you can come in and see everything that you've got installed, and that's under here too. Under settings, let's see. Notice here's some keyboard shortcuts. So if you've never seen those before, all right, because I haven't shown you very much of this. I'm not very great with this editor at all. All right, there's different themes you can use. So if you want a dark background, etc. There's also a few things in here. So I don't remember what that one is, but there's also a thing in here that we looked at before that's JavaScript. And I think it's snippets. And it'll end up writing some code snippets for you in JavaScript. I don't know if that's going to buy you a lot. It might next semester for writing some React code for you like that. But I don't know. I mean, I can install it. This is all we do. You click install, says that it's installing. Now it's installed. Sometimes it'll ask you to restart, and there'll just be a button here in a matter of seconds. You can always look through the documentation and find this stuff out. All right. So last thing, promise, and then we're done for the period. And that is, all I attempted to do in here today was to show you a little bit of, for lack of better words, what we have to look forward to. All right. And I'll even take this file and I'll save it out there. So if you want to look at it, play with it, I'll take this whole folder and I'll save it out there. All right. There's nothing fantastic at all about it. Again, there's no HTML in it. There's no CSS in it. It's just JavaScript. All right. But you'll at least be able to see that. Now, there's a couple of these things. Tomorrow. Great. I closed one I didn't mean to close, but that's okay. All right. So we have now run through chapter 1. All right. And really on chapter 1, I think for the homework and the labs, I think there's one thing, and we're not even going to really worry about. We'll talk about the homework and the labs on Wednesday. All right. But there will be, again, one of the written tests for you to do for each one of these chapters that we go over. So sometimes, and I don't go through these, and maybe I should, you might want to look through the exercises at the end of the chapter. Run the email list application, then they'll have you make some changes or look at some of the tools, etc. All right. And there's a VS Code thing in here. And if you don't care, then don't do it. All right. I mean, I have a lot of people who tell me, yeah, I'd like to do a lot of the stuff that you suggest. I just don't have the time. Okay, then you don't have to. So tomorrow we will go over chapter 2. And as you see, so after 2 days on this, we'll be 90 some pages into the book already. So this is getting off to a fast start with JavaScript. We'll talk syntax. We'll talk data types. We'll talk expressions. This thing that's in here, objects, methods, and properties, we will talk about it. Most of the stuff that's in there, you probably will not understand, which is totally fine. Then they rewrite the miles per gallon much better than I did. They're one of the ones that we looked at in class. So it looks like, come on, it is pretty much what we did. Okay, but they put the output like this. So we'll look at all that. So that's what we're going to do tomorrow And then on Wednesday, we will go through, come on, gotta end sooner or later, chapter 3. All right. And that's a shorter chapter, about 30 pages or so, 25 pages, I guess. And we'll look at that a little bit. Again, for those of you where this is your first language, there'll be things that we do in there that won't make a lot of sense. All right. And it's totally okay. All right. I would recommend, if this is your first class, that again, you really try to take a look at those examples that are at the end of the chapter. All right. That's just my opinion. So that's Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. On Thursday, let me backtrack a second. On Wednesday, what we'll also do is I will quickly show you the first set of homework and the first set of labs that you'll have to do. They will not repeat. They will not be due this Sunday. They will be due the following Sunday, which is the 19th. But what we will do on Thursday morning is I will do at least one example of each of them. So I will do one of the homework examples and one of the lab examples and show you the kind of thing that I'll be looking for you to do. When I do those, just like with the HTML stuff that we did as a class or whatever, I still expect you to do the examples that I do. Just because I did them in front of you doesn't mean you don't have to do them. I will expect you to still do them. All right, so we will do that on Thursday. That may only take an hour. I don't know. After that, the rest of the period, like the rest of the period today, will be a lab. Regular lab period. Next Monday, I will have written a pretest that will be similar in nature to the actual hands-on test that you will take a week from tomorrow on the 14th. All right. So I will make sure that that gets emailed to you by 7 a.m. I will give you from 8:05 till about 9:30 to work on it. And then at 9:30, I'll go over it and build it from scratch. That'll be Monday. And Tuesday of next week, then we will take our first hands-on test. All right. So unless you have any questions, that's all that I have for today.
I don't right now. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right. I'll talk to you all tomorrow. Have a good day.
You too.